This is The Roadmap with Ted Jenkins.
Hey everybody, welcome to The Roadmap exclusively here on ASBN.com. I'm your host, Ted Jenkins, and every single week we bring you some of the brightest and best CEOs, entrepreneurs, and business owners all around the United States. We talk to them sometimes about how they climb the ladder, how they scale their business, and one day, how do you exit stage left? A lot of owners like to be able to do that. I'm excited today to interview someone that I've known for a long time, Mishkoff. He's the founder of Granite Garage Floors. This is a pretty cool business, and I have to tell you, I'm also a customer. I got one of these floors in my garage, and I'm so glad that I did it. I want to ask you before we get into the business and how you exited. So you're in this like big corporate job. You've got a very powerful job, and you just decide one day, I'm going to quit and go start a business. Walk me through like that mentality. How'd that happen?
Well, I spent 25 years in corporate sales and marketing at Black & Decker, DeWalt company. And we had gotten recently acquired by the Stanley Works. Things were changing. I was in my early 40s. And at the time, I just felt like if I was ever going to do something different, now was the time. That was the time to do it, to jump off. And I hated getting up in the morning and going to work, and I got involved in a roundabout way in this epoxy coating business through my brother-in-law, and I was like, you know what, this could be the road to success for me. And I felt like, I was a sales and marketing person. I felt like the category at the time was so underserved that there wasn't a lot of people that had a professional kind of white collar approach to what has historically been a blue collar business.
When you do it though, you literally leave a W-2 job and you go to zero income when you start the business.
Yeah, that was not, fortunately my wife was incredibly supportive. Most of my friends and family thought I was, here's a guy leaving a corporate job after so many years, and I'm gonna go start a concrete coating company business.
So how did you find this business? Because it's going to a blue collar business from a white collar career.
Right.
And it's a business. Did it take a lot of capital to get it started? Was it a franchise?
So it was not a franchise. I mean, at the time, my brother-in-law had worked for another company, Rust-Oleum. They had an agreement with Home Depot at the time where they were selling these professionally installed floors through a partnership that they had. And they were getting ready to close that down in the mid-2000, late 2008, 9. So he opened a small company in South Florida. I helped him get that going. When I was leaving corporate America, because I helped him, I opened up a small shop in Atlanta called Atlanta Garage Floors. And then as I really got involved in the business and the marketing and understanding the marketplace in total, I was like, if I'm ever going to scale this, I need to rebrand this and do what I thought was needed to scale.
That's how Granite Garage Floors came about.
Yeah, and that's how Granite Garage Floors.
But how did you know there was even a market? People have homes, they have these cement garages. How did you know there was a market to put this epoxy or this coating on the garage floors?
Well, I mean, first of all, I didn't invent it. It's been around a long time. But what I thought it was at the time was very underserved. And my best example, and I've shared this many times with folks over the years, is that. We had just redone our kitchen in our house. We had Rust-Oleum install that floor in my own home, and people would walk through the garage naturally. It's kind of the primary entry point into the house, and they would be walking in the kitchen, but everyone would be double back and going like
what was that?
What is that on your garage floor? So I kind of had this feeling that like people were fascinated by something that was more than just concrete, bare concrete that it emitted a lot of dirt and dust, and it was dusty. You walk in the garage, your feet are all nasty, or just peeling paint that maybe your contractor or your painter that
rolled onto the
rolled
floor.
It on, and then it peeled off within a couple of days. So I was like, I felt that a better solution existed.
How did you know that rebrand that you did in 2012? It was Atlanta Garage Floors, and then you went to Granite Garage Floors, which is hard for a lot of companies that start and then they've got to rebrand. How did you know it was right to rebrand your company?
Well, at the time we had South Florida Garage Floors and Atlanta Garage Floors, and I started having this vision that, hey, if we were doing this correctly and we could scale this on a national basis, it would be better to have a single brand that all these locations could unite under, and we could basically take the same playbook and duplicate it across as many markets as we possibly could, utilizing the same strategies that were going to be successful.
I'm wondering, because you got into the franchising business, I know that you
Right.
did this in other cities. A lot of people may be watching and they're thinking about franchising their business. What was your
Right.
biggest learning lesson in franchising out the business? I see the smile on your face.
I mean, look, there's a lot of lessons to be learned, but certainly it's a way that you could quickly scale for sure. But I think the most important thing is finding the right people to bring into your franchise network that have the same fundamental background as you do in terms of being able to sell, operate, market, take a playbook that you're providing them, implement it, and then add to it. But I think what happens a lot of times in franchising is that if you don't have the resources,
right.
You buy a franchise, that's great, but you also have to have money to invest over a short period of time, call it 12, 18, 24 months, sometimes even longer, to create the category and the branding, as well as to sustain your life. You know what I'm saying? Like if you go
right.
in, you start doing something, yeah, it might cost you $150,000 to buy a franchise and the equipment and the materials and start advertising and marketing, but you also still have, a lot of people still have a wife at home, kids. You got to pay for all those things. So you got to make sure that you
How did you know what to charge for a franchise fee and what kind of royalties to put on there? How did you know how to build out that model, having never done it before?
It's a good question. I mean, I spent a lot of time talking to people that were in the business, meeting with franchise attorneys, consultants, or what have you, and trying to educate myself. And most franchisees and franchisors in the beginning, they provide large geographies for small fees, just so they can they can duplicate the success that they've created in a single location. And then over time, you begin to escalate your fees and start adding different components of the business that operate more like the larger franchisors.
It's really fascinating to me because you built this business up, you grew it, and then one day you think about exiting it. And
right.
A lot of people that are considering exiting their business don't always have a feel of what the business is worth. Did you start by doing a business valuation, or were you talking to people that said you should be able to get a multiple of EBITDA,
right.
or does it trade off of revenue? How did you start to get an assessment of saying, this is what I think the business is probably worth if I go do a transaction?
Right. It's a great question. When I started thinking, I mean, probably at year 7 or 8 or 9, enough people go to you, oh, you're going to probably sell this business if,
they say that to you?
A lot of people, and my accountant specifically, who really helped us structure a lot of our financials, looked at the numbers both with our Atlanta business and our franchisor business and said, hey, you're going to be able to sell this. And I had some coaches and consultants. But then, I mean, if you really want to sell your business, and get the highest multiple, the best thing to do is engage with an M&A firm that knows.
Somebody that represents you, that knows the industry.
That knows the industry, that you contract with, that they will dive in to your business. They'll know your business better than you do. I was like, there's no way possible. And sure enough, sure enough, within 6 months, they knew my business better than we do. And then they do what they do, and they start marketing.
How important is it to have clean financials? Do the financials need to be clean?
I would say that, like, people always ask me, hey, what? And I tell my franchisees this, or anybody that's in business, to have great financials and a P&L that looks like you're working, that you're running a big business is critically important.
And easier when you sell it, right? When you
100%.
sell it, because you have to go back and say, wait, my wife's on payroll and I got my dogs on payroll and all that stuff. It can be complicated.
Right. And by the way, most people that own companies, I mean, they take personal liberties inside of their businesses. That's one of the advantages, right, to owning your own business. But most M&A firms, as people that are acquiring you, they realize that as well. So they take the P&L and then they go back and they add back into the P&L items that technically are owner, distributions that aren't technically really part of running the business.
So no matter how you run the financials, it's important to keep track of what they call your add backs, or the things that really, they may be sports tickets or other things that you're writing them, whatever can be written off for taxes.
But you're right.
So I'm interested, and I think our audience will be around this concept of the LOI, the letter of intent. Some people call it an indication of interest. There's a number of names to it, but that letter of intent, in most cases, is non-binding, right? But was it tense going through that process of getting to just a letter of intent?
Yes, it was. And that's why having a solid M&A firm behind you to help you move away from the emotional side of things,
right?
And to be able to prepare you for what's next and how these different meetings. And a lot of this for us took place during the tail end of COVID as well. But once the LOI signed, you think like your life just got easy.
No way, right?
Huh?
Right. No, the due diligence period is really the period that's crazy, right?
Right. That call it 8 weeks that occurred between LOI and closing was like.
What did they ask you for in a due diligence? Is it basically everything but what you're wearing in your closet? Is that
I characterize it as a 6-week colonoscopy with when you're awake the entire time. And at the end of the day too, you're still having to run your business.
Right, and you can't tell your employees.
And you can't tell your employees, and nobody really knows. So you're literally burning the candle.
You're cloak and dagger for 8 weeks, right? You're having to gather every employment agreement, tax returns, a list of customers, equipment, right? Everything, right?
All that stuff, and a lot of that stuff was actually done before. If you're with the right company, a lot of that stuff is done actually before.
Right.
But then there's then all of a sudden the consultants get involved, and tax people, and there's so many different interviews that you have to go through with third-party companies that are validating everything that you have said.
Now, it sounds like with the role of founder, you've chosen to stick around after. I know sometimes businesses are a sell and go. Sometimes it could be a sell and stay for a long period of time, depending upon an owner's needs. How did that work? You still got paid for the business, but then you signed an employment contract to go work for the company?
I did. So we sold at the end of middle of May last year, 2022. I stayed on as a W-2 as the president of Granite Garage Floors through the end of this 2022, and then moved into a consultant role this past January.
Yeah, it's weird. I know, having done this myself in here,
right.
You make every decision yourself, and you do have to emotionally realize that if you sell, you're probably not going to be the person making all the decisions. Does that happen?
No, that's 100% accurate. And a lot of times decisions are being made for you that you don't necessarily agree with. And as a founder, it's very difficult to be engaged and involved in the business and someone else saying, hey, strategically, we're going to make these decisions moving forward. And a lot of times you might not agree with it. It's a tough spot to be in.
I talk to a lot of business owners who go through a business. It's a lot of work. You have employees, you sell it, you get some exit or transaction, and then the question becomes, will I do another one? Now that you look, whether it's in a different industry altogether, because there's generally non-competes and things like that. Sure. Would you ever consider doing another business after this?
Would I certainly I would. I don't know if it would be in the home services category that I'm in today. I mean, it's still. I literally just moved to a contractor consultant role this past January, so I really haven't had the opportunity to actually take a breath and enjoy the success that we've had. Which is
nice to do. You should.
Yeah. So. I think this year I'm going to fulfill my contract with them and take more time for myself and my family, and then decide what's next. As I still feel like I've got
you got runway.
I got runway, and
a lot of business owners cheap out, I say, on services that really hurt them down the road. How important was your legal team in this whole process? How important is it to have good lawyers around you? From the LOI to the purchase agreement to your employment contract, and looking at all of that?
Oh, I think it's critical. I mean, having people that can advocate for yourself. Look, as business owners, we're like jacks of all trades, but we're not like an expert in anything. So you need to have really good, solid consultants and people that can coach you on what needs to take place.
Knowing that you started this thing in 2009, 2010, you made a transaction. I'm sure it's gone by really fast. What's the number one piece of advice you would give to people at home when they're thinking about selling their business?
I think, obviously you have to look at the timing, and I felt for our business we were at an inflection point where we can continue to plod on, and we had really good growth coming out of COVID. But you need to add expertise to take it to the next level. And then you also have to be prepared, if you sell it, to recognize that you're no longer in charge.
You're no longer the person at the top.
Right. You're no longer in charge, and that's not an easy thing to do. And I've talked to so many people that have sold their businesses, probably Ted, as you have, and they all have pretty much said that it's really hard for a founder to stick around for a very long period of time, because fundamentally the business it's just different when it's not yours.
Well, thanks so much for sharing your story today. I can say that I've been a customer for a long time. If you've never checked out a Granite garage floor, you should. I think look, I'm an investment guy. It was one of the best investments that I've ever made. Thanks so much for watching this episode of the Roadmap exclusively here on ASBN.com.
Thanks for watching The Roadmap with Ted Jenkins.